I'd like to call the meeting to order. For all those who care to join me, let's stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So Bethany and Courtney will be here permanently. I'd like to read our board norms. Debate, commentary, and discussion are healthy and open. Listening and speaking are equally important, and both should be done with respect and consideration. Focus is on students and our schools, not politics. Assume best intentions in all discussions. I'd entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I don't know who did what.
1, 2.
Yeah. 1, 2.
Two.
Charlene and Ryan, yeah. Yep.
Oh.
Usually you two.
Sorry.
Yeah, the 1, 2.
Yeah, oh, yes.
1, 2.
Oh.
Forgot about that. Come on, people, get it together.
Do I need a motion to approve the
We'll,
consent, or do I ask for a motion?
I think we pull it out first.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could I have, may I please have a motion to pull out policy 6470, number 2?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I was just gonna ask for the school calendar to be removed from the consent.
Can we do
Because I
that?
had some questions on that.
We'll do, yeah. Okay, so do we have any opposed to pulling out policy 6470 from the consent agenda? Okay, motion carries. May I please have a motion to add the personnel addendum?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. May I have a motion to pull the Rutland City School calendar for the 25-26 school year out of the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, so let's start from the first to the, oh, thank you. May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, so let's start with the policy 6470, casual and/or part-time employees, and if Assistant Superintendent McKean would explain to us the changes.
Yes, so we had sent a different policy to legal counsel, and it referenced this policy. And so legal counsel suggested that instead of saying in a year, that instead it reads in a 12-month period. So you will see that you have another version of the policy in front of you that has that change noted. And so I was hoping that the board would consider, before we put it through for final approval, that change, since it came in a timely manner.
Oh my gosh.
Questions for me about that change? Thank you.
Yeah, so I entertain a motion to approve policy number 6470 as amended.
So
Second.
Stephanie, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. And now the school calendar.
So my question was, Bill, as far as the February break, when it's always been during the week of President's Day, and now I see the calendar has been changed, so 1 week they have off the 14th, or 16th, I'm sorry.
Right.
16th, and then the following week is the school vacation. And I'm wondering why that is. We've always had the prior
The third week off, yeah, the President's Day week, usually
Yeah.
off. So that's the way it's been in the past. And so we have to make a common calendar with our area schools, area districts. who all feed into Stafford. There was a movement across the state this year, starting with the tech centers, and then eventually spread to the rest of the districts to make a common calendar for the whole state. They asked, and so everything pretty much matched up to what we normally have, except for that week. The northern part of the state usually has the last week off. We've usually had the third week off.
Right, but this is gonna add another day to the calendar, correct?
That's correct, right. So they asked, we were the only area in the state that was holding out on this, and they asked that we switch. So we said, okay, our regional group said, yeah, we'll switch to that last week in February.
And what about people who maybe have already made vacation plans and booked vacations for the normal week?
Well, I don't know if this is why we do the calendar a year ahead of time.
Right.
And so they have a year to change those plans if they made them, I guess. But this is what everybody in the state has gone to, so.
I mean, I understand regionally why it's important to have the shared calendar, but I'm not sure. I mean, it's always been the North has the following week, and I know you had said something about that going into town meeting day. Now, our students don't have town meeting day off, correct?
Yeah, the northern schools, I think, I don't know about all of them, but many of them have that last week in February off, and then the first couple days in March, that leads into town meeting day, like you said. They have that basically 7 days off in a row. So, I don't love the fact that we have the 16th off, but by contract, we have to have that off for one of our
Right.
groups, so.
Just
Yes.
can I ask for clarification? So now every school in the state will have the same calendar?
Every school in the state will have the same calendar, especially for these big vacations. I think that I know there's some schools, different parts of the state, that are taking specific days off here and there. But the start times and the big dates are the same.
And what about year end?
That depends on the contract for each district, so that shifts. You know, we have 100.
So the contract, or the calendar is not gonna be the same statewide?
Not exactly the same, but pretty close.
Bill, can I ask a question about the last day of school?
Yes.
Coming back on a Monday seems torturous. How many student days are required?
178. I think it's on there
Yeah, it's on the
somewhere.
red.
178. Oh, yeah.
That's the requirement?
That's the requirement by contract for our district,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
175 for state requirements. Our contract says 178.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, I don't love Monday coming back.
Yeah.
But there could be a snow day here and there, so, I don't know if that will really be the end of the year.
Just need one.
Yeah, right.
Any more questions? All right, may I have a motion to approve the school calendar for 25-26?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We don't have anyone who signed up for public input. Okay. We are going to move on to our student rep reports.
January is a great month to reset expectations and review goals. Our character trait for the month is adaptability. Our B-Bots have been invited to now participate in the state level competition on January 18th in Essex, Vermont. As we rounded out 2024, we had 46 doors at RIS decorated with the theme of lighting up Rutland. It was a fun collaborative project to see. Throughout December, our big friends and little friends joined classes for meals and activities to celebrate their friendships. And our musically talented staff led a sing-along for the whole school. We have no doubt January will bring just as many smiles to everyone's faces, including hosting a school-wide puppet presentation at the end of the week. December was a festive and joyful month of school at Northeast. Our students and families had a heartwarming community experience with Shop with a Cop on December 19th, and our gym was filled to the brim with families for our PTC Make It or Take It craft night. Our staff collected non-perishable goods and partnered with students at MSJ to organize holiday food baskets, and students made holiday cards for our community members at the Pines, the Meadows, and Rutland Health and Rehab. The January Pause character trait is about being hardworking, and with report cards coming out at the end of January, we know our students have been working hard. Later in January and early February, Northeast students will head to Spartan Ice Arena for our annual skating field trip, a great lifelong winter activity for our young Vermonters. We want to wish everyone a happy and healthy start to the new year and are looking forward to what's coming in 2025. We are excited to welcome back students for the second half of the school year and look forward to continued growth, learning, and success together. Thank you for your continued support in making Northwest Primary School a great place for all our children to thrive. Our students are focusing on the trait of kindness. At the end of the month, we will have a school-wide celebration hosted by our first grade students in Miss Stammy's class. We would like to welcome 2 new students or teachers this semester at our school, Miss Bruna and Miss Owens. We will begin our Learn to Skate program for students in 1st and 2nd grade this month at Georgetti Park. Mrs. Russo and Mr. Coopoli will be instructing our students. Our kindergarten students will have the opportunity to work with Wonderfeet both at their location and in our school.
Stafford Technical Center's Natural Resources and Forestry program has been extremely busy. Not only are they preparing for the upcoming sugaring season, the first-year students have all recently earned their game of logging certifications, and second-year students are preparing for their advanced and solo wilderness certifications. The welding and metal fabrication and natural resources programs have teamed up to start a local chapter of the FFA. It has been many years since Stafford has had an FFA chapter, and we are excited about the opportunities for industry, training, competition, and scholarships that this will bring to our students and instructors. Make sure to check out the December edition of the Stafford Report on PEG TV. 2 of our culinary arts students demonstrated how to make creme brulee, which is a favorite dessert featured in the Dollhouse restaurant. Special thanks to our chefs Christine Boutwell from Fairhaven Union High School and Brennan Ketching from Otter Valley Union High School. Rutland Middle School students recently took the school climate survey. We're excited to report that almost 80% of our student body is proud to be a Rutland Middle Schooler. We have focused on school pride and nurturing a sense of belonging in our building, and it is working. This is a significant increase from previous years. We are looking forward to hosting Sweethearts and Heroes this month. This Vermont-based group works with students to promote empathy, empower bystanders, and cultivate compassionate leadership. Don't forget to check out our school resource night tomorrow from 5 to 7:30. We have over 30 local agencies for you to learn about, student performance, and some great food. Rutland High School was in the holiday spirit this December. The Key Club was hard at work with multiple community service projects. They designed and created 150 homemade cards, which officers then delivered to residents of the Meadows and Mountain View. At the other end of the age spectrum, they also held a toy drive in conjunction with the mission and assisted with Shop with a Cop in conjunction with the RCPD and elementary age students. RHS students were paired with an officer and an elementary age student, and together they shopped for clothes, boots, and a toy. Similarly, the orchestra continued its tradition and offered concerts for the residents at the Maples. Thank you to all of the students and adults who gave of their time and their generosity to make the holiday season a little brighter.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions for our student reps? Okay, thank you both. Next item is the school choice report and school choice limits.
Thanks. Steve Sampson's from the high school is going to come up, and every year we give a brief update about how school choice is going at the high school. And the board, by February 1st, I believe, has to vote to approve school choice out limits. And so we do a school choice out and school choice in limit for by board vote. When we're talking about school choice, we're talking about the Rutland City students, Rutland City resident students who can choose to go to another high school in the area. We're not talking about students coming from Barstow or Rutland Town or those schools that don't have a high school. This is just Rutland City students living in the city. So Steve will go over where we are with numbers this year.
Thanks for having me this evening. It's pretty straightforward. I think you all have in your packet the sheet that I'm referring to. So for as long as I can remember, through the state legislature, we've allowed 40 students to come into Rutland High School, and we've allowed 40 students to transfer out. The timeline began January 2nd, the first day after our December recess, and ends with the last day of February, so that's February 28th. So families have plenty of time to give choice some consideration. On occasion, we are required to have a lottery. The way the lottery works is if we have more students apply than spaces we have available, we have to have a lottery. So this year we anticipate 12 openings for next school year. So if there are 12 or fewer applicants, we won't have to have a lottery. If there are more than 12 applicants, we will have to have a lottery. And the way the lottery works is we literally pick names out of a hat. The first 12 selected are able to enroll if they choose. The remaining students are assigned to a prioritized waiting list. And this year we began with no wait list. So to date, this year we have 35 students coming in through school choice and 25 students going out, so that's a net gain of 10 students. And at the bottom of the page, you have a breakdown by grade level. We have 7 seniors coming in, 9 juniors, 12 sophomores, and 7 freshmen. That gives us a total of 25 incoming students. And then again, the outgoing students, we have 7 seniors, 8 juniors, 5 sophomores, and 5 freshmen, again for that total of 25. So that's a quick snapshot of how school choice is looking right now. Any questions for me?
I have a
Yep.
question. I have 2 questions. Have we ever had a waiting list?
There have been times, it's tricky over the course of the summer. There seems to be some attrition. Students who are accepted into the program for one reason or another choose not to come. So it's rare when we get to the beginning of the year. Every year is a little bit different that we have a wait list. So sometimes in the summer there has been a wait list, but some of those kids ultimately decide to stay at their home school.
Okay. And for the incoming, do they have the option of going to any of our campuses?
Yep, they're
Any
a
of them?
student like any other student.
Okay.
Yep.
Incoming.
Full-time Rutland High School students.
Incoming.
Coming in from another
Another
district.
district could go to Allen Street or
Oh,
Grove Street
yep.
or
Yep.
RHS. It could be any of our
Participate in
campuses.
all our activities. They're Rutland High School students.
Okay. And does the money follow them?
Yes, no, I'm sorry, with the exception of special ed services, I think, are
Yes.
covered, right?
Any special education costs are covered by the town residents.
Mm-hmm.
So if
Okay.
somebody's coming to us from Proctor, for example,
Yeah.
and they have special education services, the cost of those services are billed back to Proctor.
Okay, but if the student doesn't have the need for special support services, then the money does not follow.
Right.
And for our outgoing, the money doesn't follow them
Same.
either.
Same.
So that's,
Right.
okay. That's it for me.
Actually, I want to build off your question. So if they're going out with this, and they have like what you were just talking about, would that follow them from our
So if
district?
we have a student who's eligible for special education who goes to another school district,
Yeah.
they bill us for their special
So
education.
so that just sounds like a general practice within districts?
Yes,
Okay.
and that's included in statute.
What?
That's included in statute, that the special education
Okay.
officer.
Thank you.
You said there's an application process. Has anyone ever rejected? Just curious.
Not, we had a student, and in speaking with the family, ultimately, they decided to stay at their district, so I wouldn't say it was, I think it was a mutual agreement. There is some language in our policy book, if I remember correctly, that allows us to scrutinize out-of-district students in their interest in attending Rutland, so that's contributed to that process for that particular family.
Mary Beth, how is the waitlist prioritized?
So
Like
using
continuing
the
to pick-
example I have, if there are 20 students, the first 12 are selected, then, student number 13 is
Got it.
1 on the wait
Got
list,
it, okay.
14 is 2 on the
Just
wait
keep
list.
picking.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Karen?
On the second page here under the policy, it also says that career technical education costs for resident students pursuant to the provisions of this title. So what does that mean?
So they're paying, the home district is paying for career tech education for the
Okay,
tuition.
so that would
Yeah,
be for
yeah,
Stafford.
Yeah, for Stafford, yeah.
Marisa?
Is there a reason we limit the people allowed to transfer into Rutland to 40?
I think historically, like Steve said, we've really gone with 40 and 40. So there is a limit on outbound, you can see in the paragraph
Yes.
above, right? So we've always said, let's do the maximum number we can do
Yeah.
outbound. 40 coming in, I think the board set that, I don't know, 2 decades ago, maybe, or longer.
Okay.
And I think the thought is, there's no money coming with those students. And I think it would be maybe unfair to the taxpayer to say, we're gonna just allow as many as the board wants possibly. I just don't know what the logic was years ago.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. But thank you for
Yeah.
providing that.
But I think it shows that balance. If 40 are going
Right.
out, 40 are coming in, theoretically, that's a wash. So the board has to decide what the limits are. And like we said in that third from the bottom paragraph, we've always done 40 and 40, and that's what we would recommend.
So we need to make a motion to accept
We
the
do.
40?
It looks like Stephanie might have a question.
There you go.
So if a student wanted to transfer to another district, we could tell them no? Like, how can you prevent a student wanting to go to another district?
For school choice out, we haven't done. The example I was talking about, Stephanie, was for a student who wanted to come into the district.
I understand, but because this talks about 40 and 40 out. So 40 out would be city residents going to another district,
Right.
and we could tell them no.
It's statute from the state.
Yeah, and
That's the maximum number that we can allow.
That's not my question.
Yes.
We haven't bumped up against the limit in the past, and so if
What is your
It
question?
doesn't, we can move on. I'll get my question answered at a different time.
Okay. May I have a motion to pass, to set the public school choice limits at Rutland High School as 40 students transferring in and 40 students transferring out?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we have the superintendent's report.
Thank you. I wanted to let the board know and the community know that just about 2 weeks ago, the administrative team at Rutland City Public Schools took a field trip, I'll call it, and we went to visit the hospital and met with their leadership team. This is part of our effort to make stronger community connections and actually learn about what the community is looking for out of our schools, and what kind of expectations are being set for kids coming out of a high school or kids coming out of our schools. So just like we did when we went to GE Aerospace, we were able to meet with the folks at Rutland Regional, and we had probably a meeting of about 50 people or so. They had a large number of folks there that some of their leadership team and a lot of their HR people. We were able to take a tour of the hospital and see all the different functions that happen there, as well as the different types of jobs that are required there, that they're looking for employees. They talked to us about the job skills and work habits that people are looking for in the hospital. And we talked a lot about the portrait of a graduate and how that aligned with what they're looking for. So I wanted to let the board know about that, and I hope that we can continue to do field trips like this so we can connect with the community better and make stronger connections. We think that there'll be more collaboration happening between us and GE and with the hospital out of these visits. And I especially wanted to thank Judy Fox, the CEO of the hospital, and Jonathan Reynolds and Brian Kearns, who helped set this up for us. So it was a good visit. I wanted to, speaking of the hospital, the Bouse Health Trust, if you know about it, they help fund different community projects in Rutland City and in the area. They provided Tapestry a 3-year grant to support the kindergarten readiness camp that will be piloting this summer. So that will be, the concept is it will be a bridge to help kids coming from early child care into the school setting. And it's also helps parents and caretakers learn how to help kids do well in school. So they're going to learn how to understand such things as the daily routine, lunch, recess, how the bus is used, and how to work with peers and interact with peers. They have a 4-week program planned, and it will be starting in mid-July and ending in August, and will help about 20 different families that will be going to either Northeast or Northwest. So we want to thank the Bouse Health Trust for that. And Amelia mentioned the coffee house that's coming up, the community resource here and coffee house at RMS. It's being put on by the district, housed at RAS. A lot of our RMS folks are running this. It's going to be at the Keefe Gym tomorrow night from 5 to 7:30, and it's a way for families to see different community organizations that support our families. As Amelia mentioned, there's a coffee house aspect to it for entertainment for younger kids. There's babysitting, and there'll be some food there. And one additional piece of it I think would be interesting. Doug Norford from the Child and Family Services at Community Care Network is going to present 2 different 20-minute sessions about helping kids understand substance use and spotting early signs of substance use. So there's a lot of different opportunities for all different kinds of folks to see what the community offers for support. So if you have questions about that, you can contact the middle school, but it's happening tomorrow night starting at 5. So that's it.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay. And our next item is the budget ratification and approval of the ballot language. Jonathan?
Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for allowing us some time with you tonight to talk about the 26 budget and the ballot language. Thanks also, not just for your time tonight, but for all of the time that so many of you have been voting in committee and board reviews with us since September to develop this budget. It's a lengthy process that gets into a lot of detail, as many of you know. So I appreciate that greatly. I think it's been very helpful and productive, and we want to give you an additional opportunity tonight to ask any questions or provide any additional commentary. What you're going to see as we go over these charts is that the key numbers are very similar to what you reviewed as a board back on December 10th. There have been a few minor changes here and there, but the substance is the same, including the total expenditures coming in at just a little over $67 million, 5% up from the previous budget. There is one small change that I'm going to flag for you on the next chart when we get this started, and that's why I gave you a hard copy of the presentation. Tim and I have also included an additional chart that we're going to review at the end of this presentation based upon some recent input that we've gotten, which allows us, we believe, to give you an early preliminary estimate of what the homestead tax rate could look like for 26 based upon the numbers that we have at this time. As you know, we're typically very reluctant to get too far into projecting tax rates several months ahead of when some of the parameters like the yield are officially finalized. But the process has moved along fairly well with the AOE this year, and we've got a degree of confidence that's greater than in the past. So subject to change, as Tim is going to describe for you on the last chart tonight, we have some preliminarily good news in terms of the direction that the tax rate appears to go, given the numbers that we're going to review with you, which is a lower tax rate for next year versus this year, hopefully. I do want to reiterate, I mean, most of you probably recall that every year we try and bring forward a budget that is responsible and that's reasonable for the current year and responsive to not only our constituents, our employees, our teachers, our staff, and our students, but also, of course, our taxpayers. And we also try and do that within the context of maintaining a cost structure that will be sustainable over the long term. Because decisions we make today obviously are going to impact future years. So that's the general context. I think we've been successful once again in those regards, as we'll show you tonight. We've had several what I would call tight budgets in the last several years due to a variety of factors. They include such things as healthcare cost increases, which have been increasing by double-digit percentages in 3 of the past 4 years. That is outside of our control because those plans and those fees are set at the state level. But we have to accommodate that, we have to deal with it, and then we have to craft a budget that helps to balance those things out as best we can. That said, I will tell you that, you know, of the 4.5 years or so that I've been doing this, the budget that you have before you tonight is by far the tightest budget that I have ever seen. I do believe that it meets the key requirements to ensure safety, operations continuity, and the like. But this is a very tight budget that we've worked very hard. You've heard me say before that costs for employee compensation, meaning salaries and benefits, are typically about 80% of our total budget. And that's true again now. But what's interesting is for fiscal 26, the increase that we're looking at for our costs in this budget is entirely due to employee compensation. In fact, the increase in cost for employee compensation, as you'll see in a moment, of $3.7 million is more than 100% of our total cost increase, which means that, in fact, for all of the other categories that I'll show you, we've gone through there trying to take out savings, cost savings and deferrals wherever we can, so that all those other expenses, which total about $13.5 million, are actually going to go down a bit year to year, 2% or $300,000, to help partially offset the increases in compensation. And then finally, just to wrap up the introduction before we get started, we're going to show you a chart that, because of some favorable metrics that benefit the district, including things like pupil counts, which are factors determined by the AOE, and were recently reset in Act 127. Our district continues to benefit from some of those metrics, and they are helping our results in terms of average cost per pupil of education spending. And as per pupil education spending goes, which is currently in the $12,000 range, when that goes down, that helps to reduce our homestead property tax rate. And as Tim is going to review with you as we conclude tonight's presentation, based on the metrics that we have today, and which we're very confident of as of today, the prospect is that the tax rate for the school district could go down by several percent and several cents per dollar per hundred. So with that, let me move us on. Let's see if we can, there we go. So as a board, tonight we are going to ask you to ratify official ballot language. As you probably recall, this ballot language is set by statute, set by the legislature. The current language was set by House Bill 887 back in the spring. It requires 3 numbers. And then we take the language right out of the House bill. And the 3 numbers are the total, what you might call top-line spending, total expenditures for the district in the coming year. And then in the second paragraph, it shifts definitions a little bit and refers to something called education spending, which is the total after we net out some offsetting revenues like federal grants and reimbursements and such. And we are asked to calculate a per pupil education spending. That's coming in now at $12,197, which is $1 different than what you got last week, and that's why I put the little check mark there. We got a very minor update from the AOE yesterday, which changes the rounding, but we want to make sure the ballot language is correct, and it still results in a 1.7% reduction year to year, as we'll show you in just a moment. Any questions about the ballot language? Okay, great. Let's look at the numbers behind it now in the messages. From a high level, again, as you'll see in a moment, our total expenditures, top line, expected to increase about 5%. That, of course, reflects some higher percentage increases in categories like healthcare, as we've talked about and we'll continue to talk about. The per pupil education spending, which is defined by the AOE, actually goes down by almost a couple of percent, and we'll show you why. But that's a good news story for our district. As of this time, the number of funded full-time positions for the fiscal 26 budget year, we expect to remain fairly close to the FY25 budgeted level in the mid-490s. And our goal has been to try and pair that where we can, but of course to provide for positions where we need them. One of the things that I want to emphasize here is that while we're working very hard to reduce expenses or defer them where it's reasonable to do so and thereby manage our total 26 costs, we also make room for any key initiatives that our various services directors have brought forward. We always make room to continue our focus on any upgrades in buildings and grounds and transportation that are needed for operational continuity and safety, such as access controls. You've heard us talk about fire controls in the past. We're also including money in the 26 budget to begin a district-wide phone system replacement and upgrade that will be a multi-year project, but is necessary because our current phone system is aging and will become very difficult to maintain in future years if we don't get going and upgrade it. So doing what we can to provide for the necessary and the important while saving where we can. So this chart hopefully is familiar to you. You see expenses in blue shading recommended for the 26 budget versus the 25 budget. We don't have to worry about ESSER because that wasn't budgeted for 25, as you probably recall. The changes in dollars and percentage terms are shown over on the right, and I put a few check marks there to show you that, so for example, the proposed spending in total of $67.2 million would be up about $3.4 million year to year, bottom line to bottom line, which is that 5% we talked about. That is less than the increase in total compensation, which includes both salaries and benefits, which is going up by almost $3.7 million or 7%. Just as a reference point, many of you may know this already, but, you know, of our almost 500 full-time employees, 90% are represented by a union, and only 10% are non-represented, so that's a key driver. Obviously, our costs. These costs reflect obligations that we have per our contracts. And then at the bottom, I notice that all those other expenditures in the middle, from direct instructional all the way down through other, those total about $13.5 million, and if you were to, you know, add it all up, you would see that these costs are going down by a few $100,000 to help offset the overall increase. Any questions about those details? Okay, let's move on to the next chart then. So this chart is important because it shows you several categories of revenues and cash inflows that help to offset our total expenditures that we reviewed a moment ago. And there are different ways you could break this down, but the several lines that you see, federal grants, tuition, working capital, special ed, and local, these lines give us revenues that help reduce the amount of money that we ultimately have to go back to the state and say, please help fund this remaining portion of our expenditures. We refer to this as education funding. It's also sometimes referred to as funding from the state's general education fund. But the bottom line is, it's this last line on the chart that determines the homestead property tax rate. Because, you know, the approach the state's going to take is, if you want to spend some additional money and you can get the federal government to provide you a grant for it, then the Vermont taxpayer doesn't need to fund it, so go at it, and we don't have to raise that rate. But for anything that's left over that you haven't funded through these other sources, that does have to be provided for the state. And so that $43.4 million is the factor, that education funding is the factor that's going to determine not only the per pupil education spending that we talked about, but also, of course, ultimately the tax rates. And just to help with that understanding, you can see in the inset box I put at the bottom, so that state education funding of 43.4 is based on the total expenditures of 67 million we saw on the prior page, less the 23.8 million that's shown here, to come up with what we're going to ask the state of Vermont to help us with for our 26 budget. And because the sources of various inflows outside of state funding are going up by almost $2 million and almost 9%, that helps offset the increase in state funding requirements. So as you can see, we're going to go back to the state of Vermont and ask for only about $1.5 million more this year, or a 3% increase over the 25 budget, and that mitigates any tax rate increases. Okay, let's go on to the next chart then. So this begins to pull together the numbers that you've seen already. You know, you've got the 26 budget in the blue shading, and those first three lines are numbers we looked at a moment ago. Then the next two lines, long-term weighted average daily membership and per pupil education spending, where pupils are defined on the line above, are very important metrics, you know, not only for our budgetary calculations, but ultimately for the tax rate calculations. So just starting off for a moment in the 25 budget column, you can see there that the long-term weighted average daily membership, which was set up by Act 127, for this current budget year was 3,300, almost 78. And what's notable is that was about a 12% increase over the previous year, budget year, which is another way of saying that when Act 127 implemented the new student weighting metrics, which, you know, replaced metrics that were more than 20 years old, that probably, it would appear, did a better job of representing, you know, costs and funding and student needs within this district. Some people will say, oh, look at that, you got a big benefit, you know, in fiscal 25, because the number went from 3,000 to almost 3,400. My response to that is, I don't look at it so much as a benefit as getting our district to where it should have been all along. But we move forward. And this year, to our pleasant surprise, that long-term weighted average daily membership would move up by another 5%. That number was actually shown at a higher level by the AOE earlier in this process. They brought it back down as we've tested and gone through some iterations with their data management team because we want to get the right number. And I think that part of the reason for this reflects some shifting. There are students that are categorized in different areas based on the AOE guidelines, and those areas get different weightings. And depending upon the mix effects of where those students are relative to the higher weighted categories, the number can go up. And it has in our case once again. We're confident that this number correctly represents where the district is today, and that's what we want. Because we don't want to get too much credit, but we don't want to get too little credit. We want to get the right number so we have continuity year to year. And our registrar, Carolyn Babbitt, has worked really hard with us over the last few months to get these numbers as close to accurate as we can. In fact, this number at 3555 has been stable for us in AOE reporting since the middle of December. And that's highly unusual because these metrics typically jump around very significantly for at least a few months in December and January. But I think I have to say, I think the AOE has done a wonderful job of improving its process in this area in a number of ways that are leading us to this better point and giving us more confidence going forward. So as you can see, with that metric of student count going up by 5%, and our draw on the state funding going up by only 3%, well, the number of students we're getting credit for is going up faster than the dollars we're asking for, so that means that the average goes down by almost 2% to that 12,197. And I know those gymnastics can be a little hard to follow in some respects, but it's a good news story for us because the lower that per pupil education spending cost is, the lower the tax rate's going to be. Let me just stop there and ask if you have any questions about that. Okay, so if you're comfortable with these numbers, then once again, page 7 is just a brief reminder of what the numbers are going to look like, which, given the fiscal challenges that we face and the economic challenges that we face, this is, I think, a relatively good news story because most importantly, it starts with working with Bill, Bianca, and the rest of the leadership of the administration to ensure that whatever programs and budgetary needs they've defined as being necessary to maintain our educational standards of excellence and delivery of services, that we'll be able to fund that appropriately. So with that, let me ask our controller, Tim Smith, to walk you through the next chart, which picks up from some of the numbers you looked at a moment ago and then gives you sort of a prelude of what our preliminary tax rate for 26 could look like. Okay? Sure. Oh, did you have a question? Yeah, I was about to do that. Thank you so much. Okay, there you go.
Thank you, Ted. I'll be brief. Ted covered on most of these touch points, but I just wanted to quickly take the board through the calculation of the tax return. There are 4 key components in determining the homestead tax rate. Those are the ed spending, long-term weighted average daily membership, the homestead yield, and the CLA, the common level of appraisal. 4 key components. Of those 4, 3 as of now we're quite certain of. Starting with the top line, education spending. After you folks ratify the budget, that education spending will be fixed. The long-term weighted average daily membership number of 3,554. While the state still needs to finalize those numbers on a statewide level, Bill has certified the Rutland city numbers, and we do not expect those to change at this point in time. The adjusted common level of appraisal at 88.36%, that is fixed. That will not change. The big variable in all of this that still remains is the homestead property yield, which preliminarily set and established by the December tax letter at 8,553. That is still subject to change, and that typically is not finalized until the end of the legislative session in June. So that's the one unknown that's still out there that could change, that most likely will change, that could impact our tax rate. So that's why we and I are always very careful to say that these tax rates are preliminary. So if I can just quickly take you through the math here. The expenditure budget less offsetting revenues you arrive at the education spending divided by ADM of 3554 equals our per pupil education spending of 12,196. And as Ted has mentioned, despite the fact that our ed spending increased by just over 3%, the fact that our average daily membership increased by a higher percentage results in our net spending per pupil to go down. And that just really highlights the importance of those student counts. And, we do thank our registrar, Carolyn Babbitt, who spent a lot of time combing through and cleansing these numbers to make sure that all of our students are correctly counted and weighted for in this metric because it is so important. From the spending per pupil of 12,196, if you divide that by the adjusted homestead property yield of 8,553, and then divide that again by the adjusted common level appraisal at 8,836, you will arrive at the preliminary homestead tax rate of $1.61. And if you were to compare that to last year's homestead rate of $1.67, that's a 6-cent decrease. So right now, we're in pretty good shape. We're fortunate here in Rutland. We're winners, right? Not everyone is a winner in this state. There's a lot of districts throughout the state who were adversely affected by those long-term weighted average daily metrics, and therefore their tax rates, they're going to be looking at a much higher increase in tax rates. So there are winners and losers in this system. Fortunately, right now, Rutland City appears to be benefiting from these changes. Just a couple other comparative points, in the messaging relayed by Governor Scott in December, he kind of set the expectations that ed spending on a statewide level is going to go up around 5.9% this year. So certainly Rutland City is well below that, actually reporting a decrease. And again, we're just really waiting on the yield. I will point out or remind you all that there's an inverse relationship between the yield and the property tax rate. So depending upon the statewide budget information, as data is collected at the statewide level, budgets are passed, the demand on the ed fund is going to be determined, and in order to meet that demand and sufficiently fund the ed fund, the legislators will have to adjust that yield, likely moving it down. Okay, so when they adjust the yield downward, that's going to increase our tax rates. So again, there's still a lot to be determined as budget information is coming in from the state. Did I confuse anyone? I'm sure.
Just to emphasize a point that Tim made about the sensitivity of that yield, and to give you an example. So at 85.53, if you were just to assume for a moment that as the state goes through the funding balancing process that Tim was describing statewide, if the state were to decide that it needed to lower that preliminary yield, just to pick a number arbitrarily of, say, $300 to 82.53, you will be able to do the math on that to say that $300 change in the yield would then make the preliminary estimate of our homestead property tax 167 and exactly equal to what it is this year. So that I give you as an example to show you how highly sensitive that estimated tax rate is to movements in the yield. And that's one of the reasons why we've been reluctant to talk about this in any great detail in the past. But these are the numbers now, and the messages as a district and an administration, we're very comfortable. We've done what we can do to manage the situation as best as we can. And from here, we'll see what the state has to do. And if the yield goes down, then other tax rates as well as Rutland City Public Schools will go up. But, in the past, we've seen a situation where in tax letters, they come out with a yield and then it goes up over time. All we know is that it can vary significantly. Yes, you have any questions?
Well, I was just going to make a comment. I think it's important to point out that we don't have a capital improvement fund. So, and ESSER money is gone, and we used every bit of that, I think, very wisely. But we have to include in this budget any repairs or maintenance going forward that, and these are old buildings that we're talking about. So I just think it's important for people to understand.
Sure.
That's included as well.
Yeah, we've been, and we have to give a lot of credit and thanks to Graham, as well as to his predecessor, who's taking a long-term, multi-year view of this so that we balance things out and hopefully don't need any of those bumps.
I just wanted to make a comment too, and I feel like I get this sense from last year, I think I said the same thing, that for the public to understand that the lack of questioning and discussion from the board is really a direct result of the amount of information that we have been taking in over time, this time. So I feel like we have been, and the importance that we put on the budget process. I feel like this is a testament to that and how much work goes into it. Where when we get to this point, we're kind of all settled now because we've gone through this information a lot. Yeah, so I want to thank you for all the information that you always provide and how in-depth everything always is. And I think that this is, again, a great resource for the public to listen to when they're interested in understanding the information about the budget.
Well, thank you so much for saying that, and it does take our total group, which is why, like at the beginning, I said thank you so much for all of the time that so many of you have devoted to not only board meetings, but committee meetings, to work with us, to become familiar with it and ask the questions that you do. But to your point further, Charlene, about, sharing that information with the committee, or with the community, I mean, we have included as a last page in your handout, a preliminary outline of some of the scheduled and to be scheduled events that we're thinking about, over the next month or two. And this is just an initial starting point, and we welcome from everybody, not only board members, but other members of the community, any suggestions, because the more that we can make ourselves available to answer questions in the community, then hopefully the less uncertainty. And if we get feedback that we need to factor into future budgeting plans, of course, we're glad to do that. So, thanks again to you for all the guidance you folks have given us. But, yeah, we try and take the approach, by the time we get to this stage, hopefully it's no surprise.
I'm hoping that we can do some sort of coffee and conversation downtown. We've been talking about dates, and when I have more information, we'll share it out. But as many board members that can come, it would be so appreciated.
Can I just say, off of what Charlene said, our committee meetings are once a month, and they're supposed to be like an hour, and in non-budget times, we can get through a committee meeting in like half an hour to 45 minutes, and it's really fast. But when the budget is coming up, our meetings can go much longer. And we ask, no, it's not a bad thing. It's because we ask all our questions in those meetings, so you can dive deep.
It's not your fault.
No, it's not your fault. We want to understand it so we can tell people, so we ask those really tough questions, and you give us really good answers, and we take the time to ask this question, dig into that thing. What does that number mean? What does this number mean? And it's just a testament to how much work is going into it, and I think it really is important for everybody to know that there is a lot of time that's been put into this. So we might I do look like I'm tuning out because I'm very bad at sitting still, but I understand this because I've heard this many times, and I know the numbers now, and it's impressive how much time and effort goes into these things. So, and I'm really impressed with the numbers right now. I'm having a little bit of a yay moment, so sorry. Anyway, good job.
Well, thanks to you very much, and that's very gratifying, because our job is to make sure that we provide the information so that all of you can feel comfortable making the decisions.
Ted, I just wanted to say also that we know a lot of work from both you and Tim go into this, for sure. I know it's a lot of behind the scenes, a lot of late nights, and I know what's incredibly frustrating are the two big numbers that are completely out of our control, right? And so that, I think, is frustrating for all of us here, that we know you know, if you look, there are cuts, right? In some of the areas, and I think that that shows a lot of due diligence to ensuring that we are as tight as possible, even when we know we don't control two really huge numbers, two really big denominators, you know, so, thank you so much. We're gonna.
Thank you.
Yeah, oh,
We'll
we,
pass it down.
can I have a motion to approve ballot language for fiscal year 2026 for H887?
So
Shall-
moved. Second.
Do I have to read it?
Yeah, I think so.
I think I have to read it. It's long, too.
We're so close.
Like it.
We're so-
Long. Shall the voters of the school district approve the school board to expend $67,187,000, which is the amount the school board has determined to be necessary for the ensuing fiscal year? The Rutland City School District estimates that this proposed budget, if approved, will result in a pure pupil education spending of $12,197, which is 1.7% lower than per pupil spending for the current year. May I have a motion to approve that ballot language?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Okay. Now we have the strategic plan update.
I'm going to ask the teaching and learning group representatives to come forward first while we switch over the slides here. And Bill's going to kick us off, but I just want to give some credit to our own Patricia Agner, who produced this beautiful report that you see in front of you, which is our mid-year update on year one of the strategic plan. Go ahead, Bill.
Thank you, Bianca, for the introduction to the introduction. So, yeah, this is our packet that we're going to refer to, and we wanted to, at the beginning of the school year, we spoke about the strategic plan and what we were planning to do through the year. I'll just, for the benefit of the public, Bianca's going to throw our slides through, and I'm going to turn to the second page. And for us, it starts with the portrait of our graduate. We had worked on this vision statement about 2 years ago, and this is what we hope our kids will become, or will gain by the end of their 13 years with us. So that's the foundation for what became the plan on the third page. For those of you in the public who are watching, this plan is available on the website, and or you can also click on this document, not with your finger. But the plan is there for all of us to see, and it was built over the course of last year, where we had, in both cases, a large number of community members come join the board, join the school staff, and even join students in developing what we want to achieve over the next 5 years in order to get us closer to that portrait of a graduate. So that's the basis for the plan. Next page talks about, basically we came up with three main, what we call priority areas. These are the overarching goals that we're trying to achieve, and one of them is in teaching and learning. One is what we call the evolution of wellness through inclusive school communities, so it's a wellness concept. And the last one, it talks about resources for success, or how we're using resources to achieve these goals. So we started this work in the summer with our administrative team and our teacher leader group. So there's probably, maybe about 60 people, 50 people altogether that are helping to lead this work. And we asked if anybody else wants to be involved in leading this work, you could join any one of these teams. And so these three teams have been set up over the course of this semester. Bianca's leading this group that's about to speak, and Pam is leading the wellness group, and Patricia's leading the resources group. They're each going to speak a little bit about the progress that we've made, and I'll flip over to, well, I'll let you talk. I don't want to take away any of what you say. But we kind of have set this chart up a certain way, and I'm sure Bianca's going to explain that, so go ahead.
So thank you. We are going to give kind of a high-level overview of where we're at mid-year in year one. So just a reminder that this is a 5-year strategic plan. And in the work that we did leading into this year, we tried to identify what seemed manageable and what was really the key areas to prioritize in year one. Anyone who looks at this plan knows that it's pretty meaty and it's really written to have a lot of multi-year goals that really we're gonna need a lot of time and people behind to have really work. So we're gonna have some representatives from our teams. Each team, as Bill said, has teacher leaders, other staff members in the district that have stepped forward, and administrators. Those teams, those priority teams meet monthly, and then the admin cabinet team focuses on this, and there's some school-based teams that also focus on what each of these identified areas might do in their buildings. So teaching and learning has 3 sections. We have learning systems, assessment, and student agency, and members of the teaching and learning team will kind of give you an update on where we're at with each of those areas. Throughout the document, you will see that we're using a key here. On track means we are on track with where we want to be by the end of this year, year one in the plan. That's an important distinction from the total goal over the course of 5 years, but where we want to be in year one. Multi-year goals, some of these we prioritized in year one, but we do not anticipate being able to fully move through the strategies without working on them for several years. Postponed means we did not choose to prioritize it this year. You will see that many of these goals and strategies do contain work that we would be doing regularly anyway, so you might see some notes in the progress update because that's part of the work that we do regularly, but it's not an area of specific focus for our priority teams for year one. Delayed, for whatever reason, we are slightly delayed in that work and it was prioritized this year, or at risk would mean we do not think we're going to meet the goal that we outlined for this year. So again, teaching and learning is structured to provide all students access to high quality instruction and standards-based content that clearly identifies student learning and supports student growth towards portrait of the graduate traits. So I will turn it over to my team here to give an update on the objectives, and we will begin with learning systems.
Well, thanks everybody. I'm Jane Richards. I'm one of the assistant principals at the intermediate school. So objective 1 for learning systems focuses on supports all students in accessing standards-based programming and working towards the portrait of a graduate traits by removing barriers to success. Our team felt like our first strategy, reviewing curriculum, district-wide curriculum, and all that was a pretty big undertaking for our first year, and we have done some recent work on this in the past. So we chose to postpone that. We actually kind of had a leg up on strategy 2 based on some work that Justine actually helped out with in previous years as far as analyzing building schedules and personnel schedules and professional time. So we're on track with that and actually kind of shifting into looking at how student time is utilized throughout the day. So strategy 3 is really where we have been focusing a lot of our time, which is promoting and embedding portrait of a graduate traits within the academic and social standards for K-12. You'll see that it says they're referenced in 7 through 12 in jump rope standards. Primaries are working on age level, age appropriate language. Actually, all of the schools have worked to incorporate portrait of a graduate into unit plans and tied it to standards at some at different levels, and then our primary schools have also incorporated language into their personal development sections of the report cards, which the intermediate school is also adopting, which we'll have for next year. But we're on track for that, and then they're working on a portrait of a primary learner. One of the biggest things that we are going to try to work towards for the end of the year is just identifying where and how we're working across the district on portrait of the graduate traits within our schools, and then identifying the kinds of assessments and activities that we would want students to be doing in order to demonstrate these skills so that it becomes more everyday and applicable to all students and not just
So we move into assessment next.
Hi, I'm Sean Murphy. I'm the assistant principal at the middle school, and assessment is certainly a big ask to go through everything that's involved in assessment. We began by looking at our K-12 and seeing what common assessments we're offering, looking at any screeners or any benchmark. For elementary, we focused on math and ELA, and then middle and high school with our departments, we did look at all areas. From there, we realized that there's quite a bit of discrepancy as different buildings focused on different things, and look to create an assessment guide to lead teams as they start looking at building common assessments and moving forward, and then realize that even that might be too much and that we needed to back off a little bit and just start with a glossary and look at all the various aspects of proficiency-based learning and make sure that each building has common definitions, so as teacher teams are looking at building assessments and then eventually going in and analyzing the data and looking at the impact of the instruction on student outcomes, they're in a better position to do that. And if we're doing that K-12, we're in really good shape moving forward. We also have an MTSS team that's starting to branch off, and they'll be looking at Tier 1 instruction and then Tier 2 interventions, and again, trying to make that aligned as much as possible K-12.
I'm sorry, did you say MT something?
Multi-tiered systems of support.
Okay, I just want to make sure I understood that right.
Sorry, there's lots of different
acronym slang.
And we will move into student agency.
All right, good evening, everybody. Justine Lewis, principal at East Primary. I'm here to represent the subcommittee group for student agency, and our group is focused on empowering students to make informed choices and develop agency throughout their educational journey. So we looked at our 4 strategies, and our group spent the last 3 months, or the last 3 meetings, focusing on providing timely, accessible, and inclusive school communication for academic and social purposes. And to do that, we felt compelled to gather more information from our broader team across the district. So we put out a survey. We had 230 participants, so that's from paraprofessionals, counselors, administrators, administrative assistants. And ultimately, we wanted to find out what are the expectations that you're building around communication, on how you communicate with families, the frequency of that communication, and the platforms that you might use. And so twofold, that gave building administrators a good understanding of expectations being met or not being met, and then also central office team members information on how to best allocate funds for how we're using communication type tools. So there are a couple data points I wanted to share with you tonight that I felt were positive and affirming. One, while the building expectations for communication are generally as to be anticipated, phone calls or communication around student progress and behavior, it was really affirming to see that the staff are communicating positive things at the same rate they're calling home about student behavior or calling home about student progress. I know that is definitely a priority at the intermediate school, to send home postcards or make those phone calls. So it's great to see that staff recognize that just as important as student behavior and academics, to make those connections with families. A second data point I wanted to share is that email is certainly an efficient and effective tool for school administrators to communicate with team members, whether that's about tasks or information. But staff indicated that the second highest form of communication between their admin and their themselves was face-to-face communication, which is really great to see how relationships show up in our communication with one another. So we are recommending that the building administrators take this information and look at how funds are being spent to look specifically at the programs we use to communicate, and then take that back to their teams and see if there's any expectations that need to be reviewed.
One of the other things I'll just say about teaching and learning that leads into my being involved with this team is we're also working collectively as a teaching and learning team, but also as an administrative cabinet team to think about how we are using our federal funding, our federal title grants, and might we invest our resources a little bit differently to ensure that we are being really focused and strategic about the kinds of programs we're using and how we're spending those funds to support students. And, you know, federal title funds have a lot of restrictions with them. So, you know, learning to navigate those has been new learning for me, and it's helped us to kind of think differently about the investments we're making and ensure that they align with the strategic. So now we will turn it over to our second area of focus and invite up the wellness. Oh, wait, you want questions for us first?
I actually had a, so the teaching and learning, this section, I'm very interested in this section, and I'm really interested in the second objective, which is the assessment piece. And I'm hoping that, I know you mentioned about, like, you're kind of starting where you're trying to get the glossary of definitions and everybody on the same page of the terms that we're talking about here, but I am going to be really interested to see how that develops. I'd like to, what maybe a plan would be to hopefully elevate all of our students K through 12 and see what that looks like and what the metrics we will be using to make that assessment. And I'm not sure if you develop that, are there certain metrics that you'll be developing in each year, or is that kind of like in the year 3, or do you start off with some metrics that you'll use in year 1 and then add some more in 2? I'm not sure what that looks like, but I'm interested in that area. So when you guys come back to discuss again, maybe we can talk about some of those things.
There's a lot that we use right now, and part of the work that we're doing is determining if what we currently use is providing us with the information that we really need for our students. Part of the work that schools have to do anyway is we have to do a lot of reflection on data for what we already have in place. Especially the state went through federal monitoring this summer regarding their title grants again, and so they have changed some of the templates that we use when we show justification for the priorities we take in schools and how we use that funding. And one of the forms actually Bethany and I were meeting about today is a district-wide data inventory that we have to do, where we have to go through lots of existing assessment pieces that we have in place, not only for teaching and learning, but also for some other matrices that tie into the strategic plan areas very nicely. And we have to kind of reflect on that and then build what's called our continuous improvement plans, both at the district and school-wide level, based on that data. And then all of our federal investments have to be connected to that. So we'll sort of be sharing some of those things with all of you as well. It will probably be more than you want, but that we do and that we have to do now with some of the changes happening at the state level.
I just had a quick question. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
And this might be more of a Justine question, just because you were going over the communication part, and I'm curious, that's amongst students and families as well, not just within the buildings and administration?
Nope, the survey was just given to staff
Okay.
about how they communicate with administration and then with families.
But it is like reaching out to families too. I'm curious, just as, because my brain went right to noting how each school has a different communication method and each school has a different app. So when you're a parent with 4 kids in 4 different schools, there are then 4 apps. Has that something that has been brought up? Because
Came up. Yep.
I know, as a parent, I'm like, what app for what kid? And they're all going off.
And looking at the data is that phone calls and email.
Yeah, 100%.
were the number 1 forms. You know, so we're not necessarily, we're not paying for that, but we might pay for a program like Seesaw, which is something the primaries use to share about what's happening, or some buildings are using Google Classroom. So just giving the powers that be that help, you know, make those decisions. Here's where everyone is across the board. Does that make the most sense, or do we need to start streamlining some of this? And
that
I
was
think
my
from
thought.
a parent perspective, you've got kids in 4 buildings. That's a lot of different.
It's so much brain
platforms to keep
spinning
track of.
and logins and what's my username. And so that was exactly where my thought went with that is there conversation on maybe streamlining it to one app, especially if we're paying for it? you know, as opposed to, of course, like the district-wide phone calls and things like that. Okay, cool.
And you'll see there's some connection between the work that we've prioritized with the work of other areas. When they come up to present, you'll see communication is highlighted in the sections.
Thank you.
I have a question about the Objective 1 learning systems and assessments, Objective 2. I was really glad to hear the MTSS program come in here. I'm also a teacher, so I've also been uprooted, and MTSS is like shaking everybody up. I'm wondering, like, how many interventionists do we have to deliver Tier 2 services? Tier 2, yeah. And how many students are on ESTs? I don't know if that's something you can deliver right now, or if that's...
I can't deliver that right now, but I will tell you that part of the work that we are doing is looking at that. It really varies by building,
Yeah.
systems in different buildings. And as part of your consent agenda, you would have seen that we had a staff member transfer into an MTSS coaching position.
Yes.
Which is actually a mid-year new position that we were able to write into our federal grants. We haven't had a position like that. And when I came on board with working with the team, we realized that that is a really necessary thing to help
Yeah.
us start to identify that. That position really will focus 3 through 12. And I could get into all the details of why that's the focus and, you know, how we tried to rate the investment and all of these things that happen, if anyone would like to chat about these. But I think that is a huge step for us in starting to look at that and starting to look across the district at what sort of positions we have and how they are working with students at all of the tiers. And that is definitely an area that we have identified as an area we need to strengthen. And that is why we kind of are pivoting there. And that is a huge part of the goal that we chose to focus on. And also why it is a multi-year goal. So part of the role that that person will be doing in the course of the next 6 months as they round out the school year is to assess where we are currently at in all of our different buildings in terms of different layers. And when we talk about multi-tiered systems, another term sometimes you'll hear is multi-layers, and it's really about like layering support for students. So I don't have that data right in front of me, but that is
That's
part
helpful
of
to
what
hear.
we are
Yeah,
going to be
thank you.
exploring.
Question. Now, this is an enormous project, at least a decade, at least, and it will evolve, and then it'll be 2 decades to get, you know.
Called something else.
Yeah, right.
Something else, you know,
That's-
it's just, it's a huge process. With that said, I'm just wondering what the criteria is for deciding what's going to be focused on and what's going to be postponed.
That's a great question, and part of what we looked at is with some of these strategies, one of them kind of needs to be in place before the next one can come in. You know, I think if you look in the first area of teaching and learning, for example, some of the strategies really identify like a deeper level of curricular work that we first have to do some basic curricular framework before we can layer on that level. And I would say that there are nuances in each of the strategies. So it doesn't mean that we are, you know, not focusing on them at all. A lot of this work is part of what we do every day in our schools. But we just thought if our team gets behind this work, it's also really recognizing where our buildings are at right now and where our staff are at and what skills they can bring to the table around, okay, we know we have to do assessment anyway. We know that this MTSS goal, which is really what I call the assessment goal that we chose to focus on, really talking about MTSS, is something that we know is going to be a multi-year goal. We need to start chipping away at it now. And so there was a lot of balance of that, and then also recognizing that we have limited capacity, and it's intended to be a 5-year plan. So we need to kind of pause and breathe to say, it's a 5-year plan. We can't try to do it all in 1 year. There's no way we could focus on all of the strategies, knowing that each year is going to get a little more intense because we're going to be in year 2 of some strategies and we're going to pile on some other strategies. So at least for teaching and learning, that was kind of what we had sort of looked at. We also worked with teacher leaders and with the admin cabinet to do that assessment to determine which strategies we would prioritize. And then if you recall during our fall in-service, we took all that work that we did prior to the school year, and then we had a roadshow of sorts where we communicated that out to all of the staff in our buildings, that why those would be areas of focus.
I can only imagine all the buildings are at different levels. You have to kind of assess, level out. You're going to have to kind of keep building and building to kind of grow together, you know. So I feel like it's a big undertaking. So I
And
commend
that's
you.
kind of why we have structured it so that we have a district-wide team, we have our cabinet team, and then each building has a structure, so that, you know, if the district teams are kind of working larger level and then saying, okay, your homework for this month is to bring this back to your school level teams, because I think in order to have momentum and to really be able to implement this, we need to meet all of our schools where they're at and also continue to push so we're all growing and we're ensuring that we're looking across the district as a whole.
I don't know who was first. You, okay. So nice. So, I know we still have 2 more groups to go, right? Okay, so mine will be super brief.
Save some questions for that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, mine is the overarching thing, which I'm assuming more great stuff is coming, right? So, it's that in all my time in teaching about strategic planning and working with strategic plans, like, this is how you ensure stuff gets done, is doing it the way that we're doing it. So I just really want to commend the group that's already gone, and I'm assuming we're going to commend the 2 groups that are coming after you as well. But this is how stuff gets done, is by being so strategic with your, sorry, with your plan. No, but you know, like really, you're so deliberate. That's the word, right? You're deliberate and you're mindful.
Committed.
Committed.
Yeah.
So thanks for that work, and preemptively thanks to the people who are coming next. So.
This may be obvious to you, maybe not to me. These assessments that we do, are we benchmarked against other districts or like in the state? So we have a sense of like where we align in the state or the country or whatever?
It depends on the assessment.
Got it.
There are some assessments that, you know, like our V2 CAP, for example, is a statewide assessment. That is one data point. Our benchmark, like some of our assessments, like our Fast Bridge assessments, those will give you different data points of different groups that are using that. Our local common assessments are local, so we are benchmarking to others, like our own teaching groups will compare data with each other. So it really depends on the assessments that we dig into.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Nope. I feel the same way. I'm like, I'm sorry, I kicked this whole thing off.
They're going to get done so fast because we won't ask them any questions.
They're all good questions. What's that luxury?
Yes.
That is.
I was waiting for a moment to open.
Hi, everybody. For all of you out there in TV land, I'm Pam Reed, the Director of Support Services and Equity and Inclusion. And I'm fortunate to work with an incredibly skilled and professional and passionate group for the evolution of wellness through inclusive school community subgroups. And so the priority states, as it says up here, that we will embody a culture of well-being through practices and infrastructure to enhance the physical, social, and emotional health of our students and staff, contributing to the vitality of the school community. For the 24-25 school year, the leadership and wellness teams agreed to focus our efforts on 3 strategies. And so I'm joined tonight by Noelle Campisi and Lisa Warner and Karen Haley. And we're going to go through each of the areas that we chose, and they'll give a synopsis of their subgroups work. So let's start. I hear Patricia saying, scroll, scroll. There it is. So our first objective, and Lisa's going to talk about it.
Sure. So the first objective was developing a consistent approach to monitoring and respecting the social, emotional, and physical needs of the students within the school day and beyond. So looking at tapestry, co-curricular, and beyond. The team that I am on, we reviewed the current practices within our schools and within our school year. Things like, what do we do? How many staff members are in each building? What grades do we serve? What populations do we serve? We look specifically at how each school responds to the social, emotional, and physical needs of all of our students. All of our schools, we teach social emotional learning through advisories, community blogs, social skills classes, small group counseling groups, alternative locations, things like feelings, identifying student feelings, restorative practices, suicide prevention, we care, building community connections, character traits, care for kids, and so many more. Our schools have counseling staff that work with all of our students. They have access to supports within our schools, things like the multi-age classroom, pod, the right room, bridges, PACE, school within a school. Right? There's many other sort of lingos there. And what we really focused on were, what are those common definitions for each of those supports? There were a few times where I was like, well, I don't know what that is. Can you explain it? So we had to come to an understanding of what each component was and what we used and what that program was. Even within our district, we didn't know that. So we had to be able to define it. We have alternative placements, Grove Street, Elm Street campus, Parent Child Center, and lots of other places. We had to come up with a consistent district-wide consistency in order for us to learn as a group what supports are available in each of our schools. We offer different support based on the needs of our individual students. So while we looked at, okay, one school has one math interventionist, but somebody else has, 2 reading interventionists, it's not because, well, this school has this and that school has that. It's what the needs are of our individual students. So we have to look at that and, the individuals that we are serving, whether it's at the K2 level or at the middle school level. Moving forward, we want to make sure that we have more similarities and can make sure that we have similar language. For example, consistent PBIS behavioral expectations, looking at the expectations from K-1-2 all the way up through the high school so that students have the same common language. Right now we have, pause and star and bees and we are. Right? There's lots of different things depending on where you are in what school. And so how can we maybe have some consistent language that follows our students all the way through?
I like that.
Mm-hmm. We also, as part of this goal, have revised the behavioral threat assessment process and provided professional development regarding that. We also are in the process of revising our functional behavior assessment and behavior intervention plan process, and those are ongoing. Anything else you want to add? Next steps as far as this goes is really kind of solidifying some recommendations regarding curriculum and expectations, so that while the language might be different, what is our bottom line and top line expectation for all schools coming up? So Noelle Campisi's next, and Noelle teaches at Northwest, and she's going to talk about our second area, Watch Me Scroll.
Scroll.
So our objective 2 focuses on staff. The idea is that staff will achieve a greater sense of success in their work, encompassing a work-life balance, connections, and community with students, peers, and the greater community. The group that I'm working on, we focused on strategy 3, which is to model and promote practices and protocols that encourage a work-life balance and healthy lifestyle choices for all of our employees. We have specifically collected feedback from faculty and staff, 231 respondents, on what activities will support a work-life balance for each. We consolidated that data, analyzed it, and prioritized the suggestions that were given. Coordinating 3 activities for the school year based on that survey. So we have recently been working on forming a division-wide committee to support the ongoing work for this balance, allowing each school to kind of create their own committee to do this. We're gonna offer events and activities that were identified through the survey, and I think many of the buildings are already doing this. Speaking for my building itself, we have offered different like luncheons, yoga, things like that, just to help create that work-life balance. The team has put a lot of effort into creating a discount card for our employees, and we have sort of a mock-up example. So every employee would get a discount card that would allow them to receive a discount through different members in the community that focus on a wellness point.
That's awesome.
I love that.
And these are currently in the process of being printed.
I have the feeling it's like
Well played.
We're real tight, Pam.
The idea is to get these in their hands quickly so that, they can start really embodying that work-life balance.
That's cool. Could we see those?
The committee
Absolutely.
prioritized which
Thank you.
businesses local businesses to talk or ask if they would be willing to base on a survey from staff and what would help them to reach this life balance. And someone asked earlier how we prioritized. This specific strategy was chosen thinking about if we don't have healthy staff who have a strong wellness and work-life balance, then that really impacts our kids. So that's how we started this.
They can also help with retention.
Okay, and our third priority area, Cara Bailey is going to talk about.
Yeah, so the team that I was on, we were tasked with identifying barriers to participation to co-curricular or extracurricular activities across the district. So things like sports, evening events, different activities like student council. We decided to collect this information from the families themselves using a series of surveys. We started small, so we've so far created the survey to go out to K-2 families, and it's supposed to go out at some point this month. And we're asking things about families' attendance to school-sponsored events, what would make it easier for families to attend or participate, whether families feel like they're well informed about these different school activities, what students are interested in, and their preferred method of receiving the information. Later this month, early next month, when we get the results back, we'll review and analyze them, and then we'll start to brainstorm solutions on how to break down some of those identified barriers. We'll discuss, and then we'll talk about the most effective ways to report on the results of the K-2 survey. After that, we'll continue to revise the surveys for grades 3 to 6. We've had a couple discussions about the benefit of having students themselves participate in a survey with this age group, as well as the families. And then once we get that distributed, we'll start planning for grades 7 through 12, which would be a student survey. In addition to this work collecting data, we're also working on developing a list of all the co-curricular activities in the school district, with the hopes of being able to pinpoint if there are some activities that include more barriers to participation than others. And we've talked about having Mike Norman assist us with that part of the
And this priority was chosen because both at the Portrait of a Graduate and the strategic plan meetings, we heard, especially from students, about barriers that they might have to participating in co-curricular or extracurricular events. And so that was something that we agreed as a focus area because of what we heard at those meetings. Anybody have any questions or comments?
I'm really glad to see encouraging work-life balance and healthy lifestyle choices for staff, because in teaching that's really hard to do. And at first I was a little cautious seeing planning activities and events as those, although they're positive, it's just more on the plates. Takes more time, takes more effort. So I was really glad to see something that makes our lives of our teachers and staff easier and takes things off their plates. So I think that's an excellent addition to this section, so thank you.
Any
job, guys.
Yeah,
Amazing.
excellent. Thank you.
Really good work.
Pepper you guys.
Yeah.
One got the peppering.
Run while you can.
Earlier, we.
Never be group one.
To never be to just remember.
Not that I don't like this person.
Hi, everybody. I'm Patricia Secretary. I'm the Director of Technology for the school system. And I work with the committee covering the resources for success. And one of the things I want to share with you about resources for success before I turn it over to my colleagues is that we found there was some overlap in a few areas. One of the places where we had some overlap in teaching and learning was the area of communication, which was part of the work that we also do. So we'll be sharing some data with them, et cetera. And then the other place where we have some overlap is the evolution of wellness through inclusive school communities. And so we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So Resources for Success is about securing, cultivating, and sustaining resources to empower and uplift a diverse community, fostering an environment of adaptability, collaboration, and critical thinking. So I'm going to start with Carol today, and she's going to be talking about staff. And I just want to thank her and also Allie McCall and Bill Olson for doing a lot of work.
Hello, everybody. I'm Carol Baker, Fine Arts Director for the district, and Mr. Olson and I have worked on the recruitment and retention area of the resources, and Bill had worked with the central office on getting information about employees who have left the district and why they left. Gathering that data so that we can use that to help us going forward. And we have some information on that. I don't know if you want to share any of that this evening or not, Bill, but he did that. And then we are also collecting data currently. Shortly we'll be sending out some surveys of current staff and reasons they came to Rutland, are staying in Rutland.
So this is on track. We have a pretty good data collection. We're going to continue with our data collection and looking at various details about our employees and why they are happy to be part of Rutland City Public Schools. So the next area under Resources for Success is about, let me get there. Nice. Is our objective too, which is about the equitable distribution of resources for the district goals. So Deccan's going to be sharing some information about that, and I just want to give a shout out to Megan Marsh, who developed a document that we'll be sharing with the admin cabinet.
Thank you, everybody. Ed Deccan, I'm the Director of Student Engagement at the intermediate school. What I really find so amazing about this, and I think one of the board members had identified that, was that it really provides some accountability. And especially with our resources and how we're allocating that, I think that this document really kind of just puts it out there to have to do something about it, So we started with an audit of our continuum of services. That was one of our first meetings that we had. And as was previously indicated, there's some overlap between the wellness and our group. As you'll see kind of in the next milestones, it's those two groups, resources and wellness, are going to get together and begin to have some conversation about where that overlap happens. But we started with this inventory that Megan developed around what are our continuum of services. When we had this first meeting, we then began to get into For example, our behavioral continuum, where each individual building had a different name for, how we are supporting our kids in a behavioral manner. And even the members of our team were like, well, what's that room do, or what's that program doing, and how does that work? And I heard another board member say, around the different platforms that we have for communication, that's got to be extremely confusing. And in fact, this year, one of our parents was like, well, wait a minute, I thought that this program was looking like this. And we're like, oh, no, that's different here, So really aligning our language and what we are calling and defining each of those support systems for each building, I think, is absolutely critical. And then it would aid in that communication piece with parents. I think it's super important. Again, we talked about the challenge of having a multi-building district and how things can be so different and resources allocated differently, where we have schools that have 100-ish students, 200 students, to certain buildings that have 400, 500, 700 students in them, and looking at in those inventories that we took, the team members went back then and did some research about how many students are actually using those support services that we have for them. And the goal, again, as the next milestone will be to figuring out if we're allocating properly based on the number of students that are using those support services, and being able to really use our resources the most effective way.
So this is information that we've turned over now to the committee for evolution of wellness, because we've completed this, so it's been like that it's done. So the last area under resources for success is ensuring that all facilities and infrastructure are properly maintained and support the function of the environment. So we are looking at how we use technology, which of course I was excited about. And it's about leveraging technology infrastructure in order to facilitate a clear and equitable communication among students, families, and staff. Does this sound a little familiar to you too? So we also have, this is another area where we have a little overlap. And Steve Sampson's going to talk a little bit about the work that
yeah, with an emphasis on a little bit. So I think the first two strategies for this objective we have postponed for the time being. We've done some good work over the years on those two areas, but we chose to focus on strategy 3 for the time being, which is leverage technology infrastructure in order to facilitate clear and equitable communication among students, families, and staff. Again, you've heard that the topic of communication come up a few times this evening, and we're in the process of developing a survey that we will administer to staff, and after the results of that survey have been collected, we'll analyze the results and then start to talk about next step, while combining that with some of the information that we're receiving from the wellness group. So that's the progress we've made so far, and more to come in the not too distant future.
Very good. I don't know who was from. Yeah.
You were first.
I
I
was trying to point that way, yeah.
Let's see. So this is an area that I'm also interested in following, going forward. In conjunction with the wellness, I think you might have said that this resource for success, I'm interested in the support of teachers and maybe lifelines they might need in the classroom, and being able to access those lifelines. And so whether it be a counselor or whatever that might support they might need to help them get through their day, I think that's important that they have that resource available. But at the same time, too, at the other side of it, if maybe training, if they don't have the ability to face the challenges that they might be facing in their class, maybe tools to do some training to help them manage those challenges, and in turn, wellness will come, I think, with that as well, because they might be feeling challenged sometimes and not have maybe know what, I don't know what I'm saying. I'm rambling a little bit, but I feel like, so I'm very interested in the support of staff and what that looks like for them going forward, because I think that's helpful for their wellness and students alike too. I'm not saying I'm taking, because I know we're doing a lot of work with that as well. But
Are you talking about like a mentor situation or actual training?
I don't even really know
Support.
what kind of training I'm talking about, but maybe there are challenges in the classroom that teachers might have to, and some teachers are really great at it, and some maybe not so great, and maybe if they're new, and they just haven't faced those kinds of challenges before, where other teachers might have, they might need a little, just a boost in guidance and that, so that their day will go better. Yeah, and their wellness will be better, and
they can then go use their wellness.
I'm just interested to follow, that, because I think it's a good path to wellness for everybody.
I think that's the work that Ed was talking about. What each building is doing and how do we make sure resources are distributed to the needs.
Yeah.
I'm saying.
Yep. So thank you.
Is there a mentor program? Okay.
Literally everybody just shook their
Yes.
head.
Very much so.
They met yesterday.
And that's one of the data points we're gonna look at under, employees.
Did Stephanie and then?
Oh, yeah.
I have two questions. It's kind of in regards to the postponement. So I see that you guys have postponed the develop plans and protocols to address emerging security, safety, and health needs.
Sure. So if it says postponed on there, we selected 3 areas where we were going to focus.
Okay.
So we knew that as a group, we had a certain level of bandwidth.
Okay.
So anything that has been postponed means that we're focusing on another area. And so that's coming later. So we use that language to say not this year.
And then the second question is develop an annual budget based on strategic plan priorities. So is that like this group working with Ted and Tim and us in committees and whatnot to develop, work on the budget?
I would probably defer to Bill on this, so he might want to answer that.
Yeah, what I would say to that, to your first question, I think what Bianca said earlier, we're working on a lot of this all the way through.
Right.
It's not what the group might not be. The
Right.
group is focusing on certain things. To your question about budget, so what we've been doing is more or less kind of getting what's the status of each one of these goals that we're shooting for, and then we've started this process of bringing it back to the administrative cabinet, the administrators in the central office, and then making decisions about what we're going to do next, right? So you get this information and say, all right, so now what do you do with it? I think as we go along over the next couple of years, and the wellness group talked about access to co-curriculars, and are we clearly making sure every kid who wants to participate in co-curriculars getting ability to do that? There might be decisions made about do we look to fund more busing, or do we look to fund some kind of method to make sure kids get access? So that's, as we're getting through year 1 and maybe 2, then we start to make decisions that are money decisions on how we make the change.
Thank you.
I'm looking at Objective 1, Strategy 1, and I see in the next milestone section that there's going to be a report developed to share out the information about why staff are departing. Could that also be shared with the board?
It's already been completed, and Bill has shared that with us because of the nature of that information. He's the one that developed it.
We can definitely share that with the board.
Awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
Yep, it's nothing top secret or anything. We did take out names just for privacy.
Yeah.
But The reason probably we're not sharing is was because I gave it to Carol yesterday. I said,
Totally fair, yeah.
not Carol's fault.
No, and the committee hasn't seen it yet, so I thought it would be respectful if the committee saw it first.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I just wanted to say that through all three groups, I heard communication and talk about communication between buildings, communication from students to teachers, to parents, to teachers, to parents, to, and that is one of the biggest things that I hear from the community is the communication or the difference in communications and difficulties in reaching certain people. So the fact that you're spending so much time on making your communication overall the same situation, or not situation's not the word I'm looking for, but, you know, making it general everywhere and making everyone equally accessible for everyone is very impressive, and I love that, and that means that you did reach out to your community, you heard from your community, and you're working on the things that your community asked you to work on, and that makes me very excited to go tell people that they heard you, they're working on it, and they're, you know, they really are working for you. So that's very, very impressed by that, and I'm proud of that, and I love to be able to tell that. And I just have to say, because I'm allowed to, that as a Green Bay Packers fan, I'm very offended by your vest. So. Anyway, carry on.
Thank you for opening the door for me.
Just to even continue off of what Sarah said, because I agree 100%. I'm hearing a consistent theme, not just among you, but the other groups too, of the communication between the staff and parents and families, but also in making a consistent verbiage amongst the buildings, because that's questions I've heard from not just my kids, but other kids too, like, well, why are you paws, but you're stars? And why are this? And what is a, you know, what do you call that room, and why is our room called a different thing? So I really, from a parent perspective, see the value in consistent verbiage and consistent themes, even amongst different grade levels. So I feel like it helps our kiddos transition maybe from RAS to the middle school. And I've heard other families really communicate, you know, how it can be hard, even from the middle school to the high school, having that different verbiage and the different themes. So being able to streamline that can only be so helpful, not only to staff, but to families and students as well. So that makes me really excited. Thank you.
Not a question, but real quick, something that this is like all three groups, all are encompassing every single one of the Portrait of a Graduate. So like to see the work that, you know, this is my 4th year on the board, like these are conversations that we've been having for 4 years. And I just see the fruition, you know, it's finally, you know, didn't waste our time with the Portrait of a Graduate and that whole process. And now you guys are making it even better. And it's like, it's very heartwarming to know that, you know, we're kind of really moving in a very positive direction on all levels and fronts. So kudos to every single committee and person and everybody who's been involved in all of it.
Everybody stands to gain from all the hard work here. I think
Mhm.
that's great. From top to bottom, I think it's great.
Yeah.
It's exciting.
Thank you.
I
Thank
feel
you.
bad that we didn't have our group too.
Moving into our committee reports, we have building first. Sarah?
That's me. I'm still very upset about football. I'm getting there. Okay, I'm there. Okay, the building committee met on January 7th. And we have the packet, in our packet, we have the packet that we received at the meeting, if you want to get more details. But the committee members present were myself, Justine, and Kathy, and Karen Bossi and Stephanie were not present, and then we had a whole slew of other school folks with us at the meeting. Glenn Scott talked to us about a couple things that he was prioritizing. One is the high school stormwater bids, construction's planned for 2025. He had three companies were interested. The price is $707,492 for the base work. 3 companies were interested, only one submitted a bid. Their bid was for $1.11 million, which it's a little bit of a higher cost because they're taking into account if they come across contaminated soil, then it's going to be a bit of a higher cost. But if no contamination is found, then it will be the price that we put forward. The school district is responsible for 10% of direct or leveraged funds. So $75,000 is budgeted for the project, and these funds can be used to cover the cost. What we're doing with those funds is we're going to spend that money and redo the circle in front of the high school that's kind of right now, and we're going to improve that circle to make it really usable space. If we have to spend more because they find contaminated soil, we can shift some money to do that, but the expectation of finding contaminated soil is very low. It's not expected to find that, so it's probably going to be about $700,000, and that's going to take place again in 2025. There was a fuel tank inspection. All the fuel tanks were inspected. There were a few minor issues found. I won't go into the details, but Glenn explained them to us. They're in our packet. Nothing, it's probably not going to be anything very big. It's probably going to be a minimal fix, and it looks like it's not going to be a huge cost to the school, to the district. So hopefully that's the way it goes, and it's looking like that's the way it goes. But the next step is to hire a company to perform a pressure test, and that has to happen in the spring, and then we will know the results of that then. The RHS cafeteria roof has some leaks in it recently after some heavy rains. There was an addition of an HVAC system recently. With our ESSER money, we replaced the HVAC there. And when that happened, there's lots of traffic on the roof, and there's lots of incursions on the roof all over. So they're looking at replacing the roof, and when they do that, they're hoping to improve the insulation in the roof also, which is going to improve our efficiency, which has already gone up. We heard reports that it's already warmer there. People don't have to eat lunch with their coats on, so that's what's happening with that. Because of the leak in the roof, that was not in our 2025 project list. They were talking about working on northeast library roof, but the reason that was at the top of the list was because it was the oldest roof. So we're moving that down to a later project, and we're putting the RHS at the top for because it's a more imminent problem. Also, the Longfellow roof was not meant to be fixed anytime soon, but they have been finding pieces of slate on the ground around the building, which you will probably agree that is not great. So there has been an assessment. There's 35 to 40 slates that are missing or need to be repaired, and water is coming in through certain areas. The estimate for repair is about $14,000, and it'll take about a week. So that's going to be happening summer 2025. The next meeting of the building committee is scheduled for February 4th from 5 to 6, and we adjourned at 5:41. Thank you. Any questions? Sorry.
That's pretty thorough.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get better at reading my reports.
All right. Thanks for the concise notes I have here. So.
Mary Beth gets off easy. Ed said what he said.
We had 3 main topics when we met last Tuesday the 7th. First one, Tim Smith, our controller, provided an update on budget-related guidance from the AOE and the state. He spent some time explaining a long-term weighted average daily membership, which is always a very important topic to understand. And he shared the recent results for this pupil metric as released by the AOE, which again we talked about tonight. Tim also discussed the impact importance of common level of appraisal, or the CLA, including changes made by Act 183 and how it is calculated and applied. Of course, we talked about how important that is tonight as well. He then shared an overview of preliminary findings released in December by the Commission on the Future of Public Education in Vermont. And Tim said that the Commission has not yet identified any silver bullets or magic bullets to the challenges that do face education, public education in Vermont. And they talked about top priorities continuing to be, priorities continue to be addressing the affordability of schools and education, as well as continuing increases in the cost of negotiated salaries and health care. So certainly battling priorities there, of course. So the second topic that we talked about was that Ted went through, again, an update on the recommended budget for fiscal year 26, which of course we saw in great detail tonight, including the budget ballot language, which we passed. And just to make a note, that all complies with statutory requirement H 887. So the ballot language is what it has to be based on statute, and that's always important that people understand that. All right, we don't choose that ballot language. As covered in Ted's presentation to the board earlier this evening, the budget update was similar in all key aspects to what we saw in December. Our third topic was we talked about the fiscal 26 tuition rate being charged by Rutland City Public Schools to other towns whose students attend secondary school grades in Rutland City. We agreed that we should keep the tuition rate the same for next year as it is this year. The reasoning for that decision is described in the letter that was part of our consent agenda tonight. We will meet again also on February 4th at 6 p.m. Thank you. Here's Ted.
Thank you. And policy, Karen, do you want to defer to Bianca?
I will, since I was not there.
The policy committee met. It followed a special meeting of the board. So after the special meeting went a little bit long, we discussed the adjustment to the policy that you approved earlier this evening and decided to postpone the remainder of the agenda for our next policy meeting, which will be taking place next week.
Nice.
Excellent. Her job. Thank you, Bianca.
Great job.
Thank you. Do we have any unfinished business?
No.
No unfinished business. We do have new business. We have the RAA contract ratification. So
I think you're going to go into executive
Oh,
session.
we're going to do that.
all right, so I entertain a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of consideration of contract negotiations, the premature release of information regarding this subject, which would place the board at a substantial disadvantage. We'd like to invite Bill Olson, Bianca McKean, Pam Reed, Bill Mube, and Andrew Snow, please.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Yeah.